everyone, it's Hailey. Welcome back for another episode of Therapy Talks. Before I introduce the episode for today, I wanted to tell you about a project I'm working on with Switch Research called Switch Live. It's a platform for therapists to coach and guide you all through your daily mental health practices. So for me specifically, I'll be going through all 9 weeks of the Emotions Journal and in short 15 minutes guided videos daily. In this guided journaling practice, you will be able to follow along and listen to me explain each daily journaling prompt, give you some hilarious examples as well when possible. And I'd love for you all to check it out at switchlive.org. But for today, on today's episode, we have Elspeth Robertson. Her and I talk about her practice within art therapy, how she learned more about herself, transitioned into her own individual business. She really talks about the good kids, the kids that are really working hard to be perfect in their own individual lives, but really noticing those body somatic symptomology. So we deep dive into how she best supports those individuals along with adults in her practice. So hopefully you find this episode entertaining and really acknowledges all the warmth that Elspeth has to offer. Talk about your clinical practice, the modalities that you do, what gives you passion in your practice currently today.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so in June of 2022, I transitioned from doing contract work and subletting, all these counseling spaces I was working out of, like 3 different spaces. I was traveling everywhere. And in June, I moved to my own studio space. And it really opened up just a lot of exploration for me in terms of like who I wanted to work with and how I wanted to work. And the studio, it's like 500 square feet. And I have like art supplies everywhere. And it really affirmed for me that, like I said, I'm a clinical counselor and an art therapist, but there has been like a bit of a push and pull until that point in June where I was like, does clinical counseling, is it right? And then is art therapy kind of just like a bonus or an add-on? And I kind of was like, no, like I'm an art therapist and I want to work with people with art and I want to work with people in person, which is kind of why I invested so much in this studio space. And it just became really clear like how I want to work with people. So my populations, like who I'm working with right now, I say that they're like good kids or like previous good kids because I do work with kids 9 and up. So I do work with like a lot of middle schoolers, a lot of teenagers. But then I work with adults as well who have had that experience of being the good kid, of growing up, feeling like they were the good kids. So like their feelings didn't matter. And like, as long as they were just good, as long as they were, pleasing people, as long as they had these like certain results in school, and noticing how sort of that stuff leads to burnout, in adulthood leads to kind of some of these relationship patterns that where I have so many clients come in and say, like, I don't know if I'm deserving of these things because for so long they've had to prove themselves as the good kid. And so it's been really interesting to kind of like hone in on that and be like, ooh, this is where this is like what lights my fire, and to work with kids and like start to disrupt those patterns like really early on, and like be able to say like, here's what's going on in your brain and here's like why you might be reacting this way, and let's learn some assertiveness skills as a kid, and like let's learn that like you're worthy regardless of your marks and all of these things. So it's so cool to like disrupt those patterns, and then in working with adults going back and doing some of that repair of some of that kind of stuff. So that's a little practice summary, I guess, of who I really like to work with.
So you're really defining those good kids as the individuals that growing up, they're doing the right things, they're getting their stuff done, they're really kind of falling in line and just really trying to meet certain expectations and goals, which necessarily isn't like a bad thing, but it's going too far within that identity that it's causing some distress or possibly some distress further on in their lives.
Yeah, it's really like a presentation of overfunctioning anxiety. But I found that people can relate to the good kid identity more than like if you say, oh, you might have overfunctioning anxiety, there might be like a, well, I don't know what that is, and like I'm fine. Like and it's like, I know that you're fine because you're functioning, and but there are those pieces of like perfectionism and people pleasing that really hold a lot of people back and can keep us trapped kind of in this cycle. And a lot of my clients come to me because they've started experiencing the body feelings of anxiety and the results of that, like the burnout or the like constant sickness or like that stomach pain and headaches and like all of those things that are the body kind of telling you like you need to slow down and take a break. And so I do have a lot of people coming in who are already like in that state, and then we have to kind of go back to like, okay, this is why your body's reacting this way. And it makes sense. And you're not doing anything wrong by wanting to be the good kid or by putting in this work or doing these actions. But there's something that is not correlating like in your body as like something that feels good.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's again that really much striving for that in an unhelpful way that it's causing the body distress, because the body is going to show us how we feel, that mind body wonderful connection, that if we're having a lot of stress and strain pushing to a certain place, we will have that symptomology, like you mentioned, the stomach, the maybe the headache or the tension in the body. And often I would assume that we maybe would notice a lot of those body symptoms first before some of those psychological things, such as like the high functioning
Yeah.
anxiety symptoms,
Yeah.
because we're often very good at acknowledging, "Ooh, my body hurts."
Yeah, it's almost like you don't pay attention to it until it like starts to show up in the body, and then the body does like a really good job of preventing you from doing the work. Like your body's like, nope, we're gonna sit and rest on the couch. And then I have clients who come in and are like frustrated, and they're like, I can't do this work. And then we need to talk about how unsustainable it is to like try to live a life that is like up to these perfect expectations and standards, and that they're so just deserving of a break, and that that good kid label can give you, just it gives you like a lot of like accolades,
Mhm.
especially early in your life. And so of course you want to hold on to that, and it does feel good. But then once it starts to become like something that you're trapped in, is
Yeah,
and it starts to feel much harder.
for sure. And if it would be okay with you, is that something that you resonate with, that good kid label? If that's okay, I ask that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It definitely is. I'm very much like knowledgeable that a lot of therapists, a lot of counselors do their best work with like past versions of themselves. And so that is very true for me. I grew up, I was definitely the good kid. I have four brothers. So I was the only girl, and I got a lot of labels attached to me growing up, like, well, you must be mom's princess, and growing up with four brothers, that must be so hard, like you must be a saint, like stuff like that. Is even, it seems innocuous, but it seeps in. And so yeah, very early on in my life, and especially in school, I got the good marks, I was the teacher's pet, I was the one that the teachers sent out to the hall when there was a kid who was disruptive, and my teachers would say, go teach them the work. And like, that's so unfair for a little kid. But I started experiencing those body signs like very, very early in my life as well. And it took me a long time to start therapy and to recognize, what was going on. And like in my undergrad is when I first went to therapy, where, you know, that's maybe like 10 years past when I started like feeling those body symptoms. And the reason that I went was like I was so depressed I couldn't do my work. Like I was in school and I was like, I'm paying for school and like I've always been good at school and like I don't want to go to class, and like I wasn't doing my work, and that was the impetus. And I've done, you know, I've been in therapy now for many, many years, trying to like unpack some of this stuff and, you know, get to a place where I know that like my worth is not measured by my productivity. But those first moments, I remember being really like hesitant and like, oh, like I don't need this, but like I've got to go. Like there is the kind of thing with like good kids that like, well, therapy can't be for me because like I'm doing fine.
Yeah, of course.
And
You're
it's
getting
not
things done.
true. Yeah.
Yeah. I can definitely relate to a lot of your examples of that in school, of doing so well and then supporting others. And I remember a memory that's very vivid for me as well. I see a lot of similarities because one of my presentations I experience is that nervousness or anxiety at times in my life. But I remember we had an honor roll and they would publicly post in the hallway of who had the highest grades. And so there was always these two lovely men that would be higher than me, and I kept trying to like beat them and beat them. And it would be ordered from highest GPA to lowest GPA. So I'd always be in like the top chunk, and I was just constantly pushing myself. And I remembered that I would be so nervous walking down the hall to go see where it was when it was posted at the end of the term in high school and whatnot. And I remember one year knowing that I was going to beat them. And so I was so excited that finally the time. And then I walked down and I realized that the teachers were onto us. They started to notice the competitiveness between the different students. And so that was the first time I'm pretty sure I was going to beat them. They changed it and they just posted it alphabetically. And I was like, darn it. Oh no.
That must have been so disappointing.
Yes. And that just fueled that like desire to keep pushing, because I was like, well, if they don't know it on that list, they're going to know it in practice. Right. So I can definitely see that. And so how it can fuel into that competitiveness and the symptomology of nervousness and anxiety and coming into adulthood. And here I am still trying to master many wonderful things in my life. So I can definitely see how your story is so relatable and taking that then into your clinical practice. So I always say to new therapists, if you're not sure what your niche is, it's going to be a reflection of yourself. So whatever that looks like for you. But I would really love to listen and hear and learn more about like, what does that art therapy look like tangibly in practice with the youth, the kids and the good kids? What does that actually look like in a session?
Yeah. So I do art therapy with my kids and my adults. Like there's no age range that like you have to do it with. And it does show up a little differently with kids and with adults because we're different ages. But with my youth, you know, especially for kids who are so used to being the one where they have to show up a certain way towards adults in their lives. It's my main goal to provide them a space where they get to just come in and exist. And so, you know, I'm not a teacher, I'm not a coach, I'm not a parent. I have no expectations from them other that they come into the room. And so it looks really differently depending on each kid, but like I can give you a few examples. And even too, like I have some kids who come in and, you know, the first few sessions, I'm a stranger and maybe they're coming in and they don't really know what's going on with them. And it's really wonderful for me to be able to offer like, hi, I'm here. I have this whole art studio. We can talk about some stuff if you're keen to talk. And sometimes they're like, yes, like I do want to talk about this. And sometimes they're like, I don't really know where to start. And I say like, look around my studio and what feels exciting. And they get to choose what art materials that we play with that day. And, you know, I've had a few kids come in and all we do for an hour is we sit and we paint, or we draw, or we play with Play-Doh, and they don't talk to me. And I'll say, you know, like, I do have questions for you and I want to get to know you. But I see that you're quiet right now, and it's okay if you want to have just some quiet time. And you can kind of see, like, in the first session, they're kind of like wary of me. They're like, okay, you're not going to let me just sit here and paint for an hour. And then we do. And then you can see the second session, their like shoulders start to loosen. And I always, you know, there is, like I said, I'm a perfectionist, and I have had these good kid experience, and something that I've had to kind of grapple with is like, well, am I doing enough if I'm doing that? And I've needed to kind of reframe for myself, like, if this is the only hour a kid gets in their week where they get quiet and they're not like on their phone, they're not on an iPad, they're not having, you know, a teacher telling them to do homework, they're not having to learn anything, they just get to be there, I'm already doing so much.
Definitely.
And so like, this space is the most important thing for me, is to just provide that. And then when that happens and when that trust is built, you can just see there's like such a turnaround of like, okay, I trust you now. Let's talk about this stuff, like with my friends, or let's talk about, you know, what's going on with like my stomach hurts all the time. And I'm like, hey, do you want to learn about your brain and like why your stomach is hurting? Because it really doesn't make sense, like, that your stomach hurts because you're anxious. To anybody who's like not a therapist, is why would that happen? But I'm like, I can explain that and we can learn more about it. And then we get to use art as kind of a communication tool too then. So once we have that trust built up, you know, I have kids come in and they will say like, oh, I felt this way, or I was having this interaction with this person. And I might say like, okay, that feeling, can you draw it? Like, is it green? Is it like, does it have a shape? Does it have a texture? Does it have a color that's not green? It doesn't have to be green. And we get to draw it, and we get to take it out of head, out of body, put it on the page, like that really great externalizing technique, and be able to look at it together and talk about it together using this kind of common language of art. So there's so many different avenues within art therapy, which is like one of the reasons why I love it. Like, there's so many different materials and there's so many different ways to work with it, that really it can be so individual. And I think that that's another thing that my clients need, is somebody to hold space and say like, you don't have to come in and do these specific things. There's actually not a specific order, and you can't get this right, but you can't get it wrong either. So so like, even in the practice of doing art, we're starting to release some of that like perfectionism, starting to release some, because every single time I say there's no wrong answer and there's no right answer, and so we get to just exist.
And so how does it work then with the parents of those children? Like, how do you facilitate that piece?
Yeah, I see my cat and she's gonna jump on me.
That's okay. Pets are welcome.
Yeah. So for the parents, I have, like I said, like I work with these age ranges, right? So I have kind of different expectations based on different ages. Once you're a teenager, I like to give my kids like a lot of autonomy, and they get to choose what is shared with their parents. Sometimes they choose like, fine, you can share whatever. And sometimes they're like, no, like, I am here for a reason. And essentially just like what I do with parents is I acknowledge that of course they want to know what's going on in their kid's life, but the trust is the most important part part for me, and that is what I'm going to protect. And I'm always going to make sure that they know, like, that their kid is safe, and that we touch on like themes. So we can touch on like, hey, we were talking about communication, we were talking about friendship, but we don't go too in depth. And so I set kind of this precedent of like, this is what working together is going to look like. And with my kids 12 and under, I have like a full 1 hour parent meeting with parents before I even ever meet with the kids. And I say like, okay, what's going on? What are some of your goals? Like, what do you need support around? And then I kind of explain the process to them, and I give them a heads up, right? Of like, like I said, like those clients that come in and just like paint for an hour, I give them a heads up that like, this is how I work. And so, and this is why, and like all of these things, so that there's not kind of like the fix it mentality. And then with parents too, I feel really privileged for, like I said, my art studio space. It's actually 2 rooms. So I have an art studio, and then I have kind of like more of a classic counseling space, like with the couch and the chair and everything. And they're connected. And so when parents come, they get to like lay on the couch. Like we get to close the door and they can lay on the couch, and it feels like so great to be able to offer for parents like, hey, this is a landing space for you too. And we do, at the beginning of each session with kids 12 and under, everybody who attends, sometimes parents bring siblings. I've had sometimes like clients show up with like their friend that they're gonna have a play date after. Everyone who attends comes into the studio room, and we all do a feeling check-in. So I have this like laminated page of like all the feelings, and we just all circle how we're feeling. And it kind of, I like to do that with everyone because I want to show the kids that like their feelings aren't wrong, and they're not here because they're doing anything wrong, and that everybody has feelings. And so we circle our feelings, and I do it too. And we are able to offer explanation to our feelings, or we're able to just circle them and say like, that's enough. But I really like to start that way because, again, it's like that safety thing, right? Of like, we're just here to be able to express ourselves, and like me circling my feelings, and I always say to parents to tell the truth. Like don't just circle that you're happy. If you are just happy, that's great. But like, I have circled all of the feelings at one point. I have circled sad when I'm sad. And, I've had kids like look at me and be like, you're sad? Like, and I'm like, yeah, I am sad. Like, I know I'm smiling because I am happy to see you. And I circled happy too, but I can be many feelings at one time. And so I like to offer that as kind of my opening, as like just this really beautiful reflection on, we all just get to have feelings, for kids who have either been told or have internalized that any feelings that aren't happy are not good feelings.
Yeah. How impactful is that? I love that that's your opening and opportunity for emotional literacy, acceptance, understanding your feelings and expressing them in such a non-judgmental way. Because I probably, I assume like, as I see in my clinical practice with adults, many times there's this expression of, I wasn't shown or modeled how to feel my feelings, or my feelings were not accepted. And so there was a lot of like restriction around it. So how wonderful you are in that proactive way when they're younger, offering that really respectful, welcoming, accepting place for all variety of emotions.
Yeah. It's really cool to see. And then like my kids get that feeling chart to take home so they can circle it at home. And I've had parents come in and I have kids who are like, blah, 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 blah. Like they circle them all because they know where they are on the chart because they've used it at home. And I've had parents who have come in who their kids have come to them with a feeling chart circled already because they need to talk to them about something and they didn't know how. And so like, it's such a great tool. And then it's cool to see too, as kids become more resourced, like if a parent comes in and circles sad, and I'm always like, yes, you're saying your real feelings, or like a parent comes in and circles whatever, and then the kid, I've had many times before, they like look at them and say like, I didn't know that you're feeling that way, and then they offer them some of their coping tools, some of their resources, like they say like, Mom, do you want to take a breath together? Or like all of these things that we work on. So yeah, it just feels like really incredible just to see how quickly kids can kind of latch onto that, and yeah, like you said, that emotional literacy, but also just that acceptance piece of like, this is okay.
Mm-hmm. It's so impactful. Like, as I said, it's so often we're so denying of emotions. And a lot of the trauma work that I do, that first step is acknowledging our feelings, noticing how they show up in the body, noticing how we can interact with them and regulate them and express them. So often that's so wonderful that you're doing that within that modality of art therapy. And so would it be fair to say that as you work with kids or even adults, like you are on that path of self-identity discovery?
Like my clients?
Yeah.
Yeah. I kind of say that like working together is self-exploration, and we get to just uncover these different parts of ourselves. And my business is called Intrinsic Therapy because I kind of started connecting with that word intrinsic, of like, art is just like part of our like makeup, but it's something that so often, especially into adulthood, it's like, I can't do art, I'm not an artist. And so I was like, I want my practice to be able to bring people back to kind of like those natural healing abilities that we just have present in our body. So creativity is a really big one, and being able to express self through creativity, whether it's visual art or dance or like movement or songs, like there is just such a spiritual element of that that can be lacking, especially when we want to present a certain way in the world. And then like the body stuff too is so intrinsic too. And I like to integrate all of that kind of stuff too. So what I find is that with that identity or exploration, like often what I will present to my adult clients is like, okay, you've been living shoulders up for a really long time. You've been living head only, thoughts only, logical explanations, rationality. We're going to go shoulders down. We're going to try and sink into that intuition and that guide of like, what are your values in life? Like, what are the things that make you want to go forward instead of those shoulds of like, you should be doing this. So it is this identity exploration is like kind of like a coming back to self, as we start to kind of untangle what expectations are society's expectations, or maybe the expectations of other people in your life, and what expectations are, hey, this is actually how I want to live, and this is how I want to move forward. And we get to kind of uncover that. So it's a cool process. And I tend to work with people pretty long term, because just new things are uncovered all the time. So like my first few sessions, we are doing a lot of like coping, a lot of resourcing, I do a lot of like those subtle like paradigm shifting questions of like recognizing black and white thinking, stuff like that. And then when we have got to the place where we're well resourced is when we start to do a little bit more deeper identity stuff, and that's where it like really comes alive, and that's where I get to kind of, it's almost like I re-meet my clients because like I met them in such an anxious state, at the start, and then we get to sink into like, oh, this is who I want to be, and that's
Yeah.
really cool.
Yeah, definitely. I can definitely relate to that idea because I like to tease my clients if they're up for it. But after about a year of therapy, perhaps if it's been almost around exactly the year, they'll come in and I'll say happy birthday and they'll go, excuse
Yeah.
me. And I said, well, it's nice to re-meet you because I feel like it's been a year of growth of wonderful things. And I almost want to re-meet you with all the wonderful progress and skills that you've learned and deeper intrinsic reflections and all of the intra relationships you have developed with your different parts of self. And so I always tease them like, happy birthday. It's welcome. Nice to meet you again. You've been reborn. But so I totally align with that idea that so much of the beginning of therapy is kind of creating that stabilization and regulation piece. But once that can happen, there can be so much more expansive discussions or when clients come to therapy and they're going, things are going really well. I'm like, wonderful. Let's go deeper because you have that space when you're well to take that step a little bit further. So it sounds so wonderful, all of these different things that you're offering. And it sounds like the way that you talk about it and you just light up with it, it sounds like it's found its home in your soul in the way that you express all of this.
It's cool. And like, I love my clients. Like, it's so amazing to be able to come in and witness that. And like you said, re-meet people and like walk with them in so many different parts of their journeys. And like working long term means that just like so many things come up that like they would have never expected to come up, and that we get to have, this really great solid foundation to explore those things as they come up.
Mm-hmm. And so in my mind, when creating art and imagining a perfectionist trying to facilitate art or make something, how would you support them with that frustration or being able to let go of that perfectionism when creating something? Because technically speaking, you can make like a line more straight or like this color more expansive, whatever it may be. So it probably, I imagine, can be quite hard to help and support a client to let go of some of that perfectionism and manage the disappointment or discomfort along with that process.
It's really fun.
Okay.
Because I'm like, I see you. I know what you're trying to do. You're trying to make good art. And like, we're not here to make good art. And so, yeah, like you said, there is always the way to get the line. Like, and so I do work with art in like so many different ways. But in terms of like that perfectionism piece, like we do some parts work. We're going to draw our inner critic. We're going to get to know it. We're going to talk about those influences. And I'm a big fan of disclosure when it's needed. And so I draw my inner critic too. Like, you're not alone. Like, we have these, and so we do some of that parts work, and so that we can kind of get a chance to understand that perfectionism. But then when we move into wanting to work through that perfectionism and maybe let go of that, there's so much resistance to that, which makes sense because perfectionism is a safety behavior. And so there's so much resistance to that. And I do a lot of frustration tolerance. So I sometimes put on a timer. I flip the sand timer and I say, we're going to do this for 2 minutes. And I know you can do this for 2 minutes. And if you're frustrated, that's okay. In 2 minutes, you get to tell me how frustrated that was and how much that sucked and like all that stuff. So sometimes we're just making marks on the page, like just lines or just like dabs of a paintbrush. Sometimes I might have people come in and I'll say, today we're going to make the ugliest art you can make. Like, so it's like, and then they're like, like, then they want to try and do the best, ugliest art, but there's no way to do that. So what it turns into is like, gets like full body involved. Or like I might teach them a new art technique and be like, we're going to practice being new at something. Because so much of perfectionism as well is like the avoidance of doing something that's new because you know you're not going to be good at it right away. And so art can really facilitate all of this exploration, and especially because we have a lot of preconceived notions about art because we grew up being graded on art, and we have these notions of like, well, I can't do art if I'm not an artist, that it's a really great avenue to actually explore perfectionism because it's going to just very intensely bring up that discomfort in the body. And then we get to use our tools, our coping. Then we get to say, okay, what is your inner critic thinking right now? And we get to explore that stuff in the moment. So it's really like I said, it's really fun because like I love just seeing those like kind of revelations come out. And for me, like I said, I'm a clinical counselor and an art therapist, and I do sometimes have those sessions that we are talking because that is what we need. But I've never seen that kind of like deep revelation come out of the talk. Like it always comes out in the art, and that might be also because I'm so passionate about doing the art that there is kind of like my clients in general do want to do art with me. So, and they have seen that art can lead to these things. So they're like more willing to do it, and they're more willing to trust me when I say like, hey, this is going to be really frustrating, but this is why we're going to practice it. And does that make sense? And yeah, so some of those things that come up is really, really cool.
Yeah, that sounds so interesting. And is it true that you also provide somatic experiencing?
So I have my somatic experiencing all of the beginners, beginner 1, 2, 3. So I'm not a somatic experiencing professional. You need like 2 years of training for that. But I do have the training in it. And I have some integrative somatic studies training as well. And so I will offer it in connection. So I don't, you probably have like, are able to ascertain that like my sessions are very much like whatever comes up. Like
Totally.
I'm not like, today is a somatic session. And
No,
then
no, no.
we're going to do
I was
art.
just curious maybe how it influenced like art therapy and what that would look like.
Yeah. So it can be really cool because, if I do notice that somebody is getting really activated in their body, I have the ability to draw from that somatic experiencing training and say like, okay, we're going to pause. And I can tell that you want to keep talking and that you want to do head, shoulders up, and you want to like, just like whirl this around, but we're going to pause and there's time to talk after the pause. And then we, identify those body sensations. We allow those sensations to move through. And then something that I is part of the training in general is like bringing like imagery and meaning to body sensations. And that leads really well into doing art. So, I've had times before where it's like, okay, there's this pit of stomach feeling and it's like a clenching, and I have them name the sensations. I have them name, the shape and like how big is it, and all of those things that are part of somatic work. And then especially if we've noticed that this has come up many times before, I will invite them like, can we draw this? Or can we put this in clay? Of like, I want to see what this body feeling looks like. And then when you have it on the page, then we get to expand on it. Like we get to draw those connections and build meaning from it. So sometimes it turns into an art exercise, and sometimes it stays in body and talk of like, we're going to pause, we're going to feel body, and then mind starts racing, and it's like, I need to talk about what just happened in my body. And that's also really wonderful and great. So there's just like so many different avenues that you can go. I do sometimes, like in my sessions, I'm like, oh, like when like things come up and my clients are talking, and I'm like, which way do I want to kind of guide? And that's cool to know that there's so many different possibilities. And I really like my clients to have agency as well, in terms of, like I said, like I can guide the session towards many different types of like interventions. But if my client is like, I don't want to do art today, I'm gonna be like, great, we don't have to. Like, there's something about today that art is not feeling like what you need, and that's okay. Yeah.
Yeah, it's so wonderful that you offer so many different ways of exploring our emotions and what's happening in the body through art, through talk therapy, incorporating somatic experiencing. It's so wonderful that you have many, if I may tease you, many paintbrushes in your jar to offer everyone that comes to see you. And it sounds like you do such a wonderful job at tailoring each session to each person's need, but you have such a variety of options available. So, and it sounds like since this year, you've just been able to glue it all together and provide it in your own individual practice in one location too, which is such a huge success as a clinician to be able to bring everything together in that way. Yeah. And so what are we missing so far in terms of this discussion of good kids and art therapy and adults with kids? And
I'm not sure. I feel like I've been able to kind of tell you a lot about my practice. Maybe like just as you mentioned, like the space too, like bringing it all together. I want to acknowledge too that space does a lot of work as well. So like you mentioned my background, and like this is my home, but like my studio space, I put so much effort and care into making it just like it's gorgeous. Like, just to be just to toot my own horn a little bit. But I put so much care and effort into that because of that kind of thing of like, my clients deserve that. And I've done a lot of unlearning, like in my personal work and in like academia, and I'm trying to move farther away from medical model of like, especially in terms of like the good kids thing, is like, so many of my clients that come in and see me would not get a diagnosis in the medical field, but that doesn't mean that they're not deserving of care and support. And so my space is designed so that when you walk in, you immediately feel held, and that like you are deserving of being here in this space. And like, that is kind of that's actually one of my offerings I'm like most proud of, that people want to be there. Like, you hear so much about therapy, like in popular media too, of like, I don't need to go to therapy, or like only this type of person goes to therapy. And there is still that stigma around it. And when I was building my space, well, I didn't build it, it's in a heritage building, but when I was creating my space, I was like, I want therapy to feel like a gift. Like, it's definitely an investment. And there is that aspect of, you are paying me for my services, but I want your time to feel like a gift. And so those offerings of that self-exploration is already so wonderful, but then I just like to add those like elements of like, you get to exist in this beautiful space, and like the elements of like openings and closings, like when my clients arrive, do you want a tea? Do you want a water? Like, I have some chocolate covered almonds. Are you hungry? Like, being able to arrive with that. And then my closings too, I like to facilitate a closing with like, we're going to do a breath together. And then maybe we'll pull a card from my affirmation deck, and my clients get to take their card home. And like, that's just like such a special treat. And something that I introduced last year that I really love about my practice is it came from like a little bit of a personal place in when I was working with kids at my contract job, I was working with lots of big age range. So probably like 4 to 16. And my young kids got a gem every time. Like they got to choose if they wanted a sticker or a gem when they left, as sort of like, here's a talisman. And like, like how you get after you go to the dentist as a kid and you get to open the treasure box, like they got that. And at that point, last year, I was going, like, my therapy journey was starting to feel really hard, like with my therapist. And I was like, I want a gem. Like, I was like, I just want someone to give me a gem. Because like this work is so hard and you put so much of yourself into it, and it goes unrecognized of like people might say like I'm in therapy, and but there's so much behind the scenes that like when you're in therapy, you are changing so much in your life because you're coming to these like identity explorations. And I was just like, I want a gem. And I started introducing into my practice. Like I went to Beadworks on Granville Island and I picked up all these just like really beautiful special beads. And my clients now, each time they come in, they get a bead. And it's like my second session. We start their bead chain, and they get a tassel and then a chain, like a thread to like thread their beads on each session. And it kind of started in this place of like, I want a gem too. But then considering, especially for burnout and especially for women, there is this lack of recognition in working life, in the mental load, in all of these things. And it's become this really beautiful practice of like, I'm recognizing that you came in here today and you did really hard work, and that you have like, and I have some clients now who they've had to start a new chain because they got up to 25 beads and they're like, I need another one. And like they display their beads and like I said, they're beautiful, like these beautiful beads from Granville Island, and they get to have this like special experience at the end, where I have like my bead, like I have a special tray for them, and I say like, pick a bead that represents like what stood out to you from today. And so being able to offer that space and offer that beauty and those openings and closings, and just like offering like, you're not here for punishment. You're not doing anything wrong. You're just here to come back to like who you want to be.
Mm-hmm.
Is like really special for me to be able to do that.
That is just absolutely beautiful. That is such a wonderful creative idea, and to really show progress, because often a lot of the progress that we do doesn't really have that big moment of noticing it. Yeah, totally. Yeah. It's like, did you notice I went to therapy today? It's like, no. But I can visually show that.
Yeah, right? This is something tangible to be like, look at all this work you did. And then it's like, yeah, I did do that work. It's so it's my little like gift to my clients. And I love to be able to do it.
Yeah. That sounds so beautiful and wonderful, and such a way for them to show that and to work towards it, to see progress. Because I often tell clients that progress isn't linear. It's like a slinky. You go forward and you come back, but when you come back, you never are where you started. And so we often have to sometimes look back to see how far we've came. And that's just such a wonderful, beautiful representation of all the hard work that they're doing in those sessions, showing up and participating and reflecting in their own individual time about what has been worked on.
Yeah. And it's like, if anything, this bead is a representation that you showed up for yourself.
Yeah, definitely.
Right. And you get to like look at it and be like, I did it. Yeah. So yeah, I feel like that my practice now that like I'm in my own studio just gets to be like a little more special, and I get to bring more of myself to it, and kind of offer the services that I want to offer. So I'm pretty excited to just like continue in this space and to like work with those good kids and like know that they're still good even when they say no, and even when they don't take on more work, and even when, right? Like there's just so much goodness in them that deserve this.
Of course, that's just so beautiful. I love that so much. I appreciate that you offer such wonderful, diverse opportunities and practices, and just your caring nature just comes through so much in what you do.
Thank you.
Yeah. Well, it's been so wonderful talking to you today. I appreciate all that you've shared, all that your hard work that you're doing. I did notice that you do offer some workshops. Are those only in person, or are those online as well?
Um, it's a mix. So, like I said, I'm excited about my studios. I want people to come to my studio. I do every Wednesday weaving club, which is like, so like fiber arts weavings. It's one of like my big like passions as an artist. And something that I say to my clients all the time is, if you want to have something in your life, you need to schedule it. And so it's on my schedule every Wednesday that I get to do this art that I love. And then I was like, I'm going to open it up to the community. So that's one of like my favorite offerings, which is in person. And that one is like kind of like the most accessible financially option. And I get to teach you how to weave, and we get to do this kind of like meditative art practice. And then I do offer, some in studio workshops in terms of like intuitive art making. And I do like vision boarding in my studio, which is really, really fun. My magazine collection has gotten a little out of hand. Like I have like, probably like 15 shelves of magazines. But it's perfect for vision boarding. So I like to be able to offer my own supplies for people in person. But then I do some, online groups and workshops as well. So my colleague Bethany, who you guys got to talk with a few months ago, we run this group called the Art of Self-Love. And it's like a 6-week group, and we go through the 5 love languages, but then we turn it into self-love. So it's like 5 love languages, but for yourself. Like, and then, we create art based on what is coming up in that group. And we've run this group a few times now, and each time, like, I learn something new about myself. It's definitely one of my favorite offerings. And that group in February of this year was one of the things that prompted me to get my studio space. Like when I was making the art, and when we were talking about self-love and, acts of service to self, and I was like, I need to be in a space that's just mine. Like I need to like move my business forward in this way. And it was like really scary, but I got to like kind of do that personal exploration as well. And that's what I kind of love about groups, is that we get to participate. Like we're making art with you. You're not alone. Like there's a whole group, and there's this like collective witnessing of everybody's journey. And so I'm coming to the end of this group again now next week. And like always, it's always like, oh my goodness, I learned so much. Like, and so that's one that is definitely going to continue online. Every few months we'll try and offer it. It's always a really cool exploration, and really beautiful to witness that self-love.
Mm-hmm. That's so wonderful that those are all available. So anyone in Vancouver, please make sure to check you out and take a class and learn something new.
Yeah.
Well, it was so wonderful having you. I appreciate your time so much. Thank you. Let us know if you ever come down to the Okanagan. We'd love to see you and things like that. So thank you so much.
Yeah. Thank you, Hailey.
Yeah, wonderful.